Late in the evening, you may notice a small light glowing in a distant window. It may be there every night, or perhaps this is the first time you have seen it. Nothing dramatic happens. The light does not move, and no figure appears behind the glass. Yet for a moment, your attention rests upon it. You wonder which room it belongs to, why it is still lit, and what quiet activity might be taking place inside. The question may last only a few seconds. It may fade as your thoughts move elsewhere. But during that brief interval, something subtle has happened. The mind has encountered a small piece of the world that it cannot completely explain, and it has turned gently toward it. This quiet turning is one of the simplest forms of curiosity. Curiosity is often imagined as a powerful urge to travel, experiment, invent, or discover. It can certainly lead to those things. But it does not always begin with excitement or ambition. More often, it begins almost silently, as a slight change in attention. Something feels unfamiliar, incomplete, or unexpected, and the mind pauses. Perhaps you hear a soft sound in another room and wonder what caused it. Perhaps you find a sealed envelope among old papers and try to remember where it came from. You may notice an unusual object on a shelf, a strange shape in a cloud, or a pattern of stars that seems different from the night before. A story ends in the middle of an important moment, and the unfinished part remains in your thoughts. In each case, there is a small distance between what is known and what is not yet known. You understand part of the situation. There is a sound, but not yet a clear source. There is an envelope, but not yet an explanation. There is a story, but not yet an ending. This missing piece creates what is sometimes described as an information gap, an awareness that some part of understanding is absent. The gap does not always feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it is simply open, like a door that has not yet been entered. The mind senses that there may be something on the other side, and attention leans toward it. This may help explain why questions can remain active even when we are not deliberately trying to solve them. A question such as why the sky changes color near sunset may appear during an ordinary walk. At first, it may be no more than a passing thought. Yet later, when the evening sky becomes orange again, the question returns. The mind recognizes the familiar mystery. Curiosity often grows from this combination of familiarity and uncertainty. If everything were entirely unfamiliar, it might be difficult to know where to begin. If everything were already understood, there would be little reason to investigate. Curiosity tends to live somewhere between these two conditions, where enough is known to form a question, but not enough is known to answer it. Novelty can also attract attention. The brain is constantly receiving more information than conscious awareness can hold. Sounds, colors, movements, textures, memories, and bodily sensations all compete quietly for notice. Much of this information is predictable and can remain in the background. But when something differs from expectation, attention may shift toward it. An unfamiliar sound in a familiar house is often more noticeable than the steady hum of an appliance. A single unusual stone may stand out among many ordinary ones. A sentence that ends unexpectedly can hold the mind for a little longer than a sentence that follows a familiar pattern. This does not mean that every new detail creates curiosity. Some unfamiliar things are ignored, and others are quickly understood. Curiosity is shaped by many influences, including personal interests, past knowledge, current needs, emotions, and the situation itself. The same question may feel deeply interesting to one person and almost invisible to another. A gardener may notice the shape of a leaf that most people pass without seeing. A musician may hear a change in rhythm hidden within an ordinary sound. Someone who enjoys the night sky may recognize a faint point of light as unusual, while another person sees only a peaceful field of stars. Curiosity is therefore not simply a property of an object. It emerges from the meeting between the world and a particular mind. When curiosity appears, new information can feel rewarding. Finding the source of a sound, learning the meaning of an unfamiliar word, or discovering how a simple tool works may bring a quiet sense of satisfaction. The brain has systems that help guide attention, motivation, learning, and reward. And these systems can take part when information seems valuable. But curiosity is not explained by one chemical or one region of the brain. It is better understood as a coordinated state involving attention, expectation, memory, motivation, and the search for meaning. The experience may include reward, but it is also shaped by what a person already knows and what they believe could be learned. This helps curiosity support exploration. When something attracts attention, a person may look more closely, listen for longer, ask a question, open a book, move nearer, or compare the new detail with something remembered. These actions are often small, yet through many such moments, knowledge gradually expands. A child turns an object over to see its hidden side. An adult rereads a paragraph because one sentence seems incomplete. Someone watches the changing color of the sky and begins to notice the relationship between sunlight, clouds, and the horizon. Curiosity gives attention a direction, and attention allows experience to become more detailed. Information discovered through curiosity may also be remembered more clearly. When the mind actively wants an answer, it may become more receptive to relevant details. The question provides a place for new information to settle. Instead of arriving as an isolated fact, the answer becomes connected to an existing pattern of thought. Even then, the process is not perfectly reliable. Curiosity does not guarantee understanding, and memorable information is not always accurate or useful. Questions can lead in many directions. Still, the movement toward an answer often creates conditions that support observation and learning. Perhaps this is why curiosity can feel both ordinary and profound. It appears in laboratories and libraries, but also beside windows, beneath trees, in kitchens, on quiet streets, and during moments when nothing important seems to be happening. It is present. When someone wonders what lies behind a closed door, why a familiar bird has changed its call, or how an unfinished story might continue. These small questions do not need to lead to great discoveries. Their value begins earlier, in the simple act of noticing that the world contains more than is currently understood. Curiosity is not only a desire to collect facts, it is a quiet movement of the mind toward the boundary of what it already knows. At that boundary, a missing detail can remain gently present, neither forgotten nor fully resolved, waiting in the background of awareness like a question whose shape has been seen, even though its answer has not yet arrived. A question does not need to be spoken aloud in order to shape attention. Sometimes it appears only as a faint sense that something is missing. You may look at an unfamiliar machine and feel that there is a part of its purpose you do not yet understand. You may hear the beginning of an explanation and notice that your mind is already waiting for the next sentence. The missing information forms a quiet outline, even before the answer is known. This is one reason an unanswered question can remain present in the mind. The mind does not simply store separate pieces of information. It also forms expectations about how those pieces belong together. A familiar sequence suggests what may come next. A known pattern creates a sense of order. When one part is absent, the gap can become noticeable because the surrounding structure gives it a shape. Imagine seeing a row of footprints across damp ground. Most of them continue in a clear direction, but then they suddenly stop. The missing continuation may attract more attention than the footprints themselves. You know enough to expect that the trail should lead somewhere, yet the evidence ends before the expectation is satisfied. A similar process can occur with ideas. When a story introduces a locked room, a forgotten name, or an unexplained object, the mind begins to form possible connections. Even a very simple question can create this effect. What made that sound? Why did the light go out? Where does this path lead? Once the question is formed, related details may become easier to notice. If you are wondering about an unfamiliar sound, you may listen more carefully to its rhythm, distance, and direction. If you are trying to identify a plant, you may suddenly notice the shape of its leaves, the arrangement of its stems, and the texture of its surface. Features that were previously part of the background begin to feel relevant. Curiosity can therefore change not only what we think about, but also what we perceive. Attention is selective. At any moment, the senses provide more detail than conscious awareness can fully examine. The mind must choose what to emphasize and what to leave in the background. A question helps guide this choice. It acts like a gentle filter, making some details seem more important because they might help complete the missing understanding. This is not always deliberate. You may have experienced the strange feeling of noticing a word repeatedly after learning it for the first time. The word was probably present before, but it did not stand out. Once it became meaningful, attention began to recognize it more easily. An unanswered question can work in a similar way. It prepares the mind to detect information that might be useful. The gap between knowing and not knowing is not fixed. It changes as understanding grows. At first, a question may be very broad. You might wonder how birds know where to travel during migration. After learning a little, the original mystery may divide into smaller ones. How do they use the position of the sun? Can they sense the Earth's magnetic field? How do young birds begin a journey they have never made before? Each answer may reduce one uncertainty while revealing another. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of curiosity. Learning can satisfy a question, but it can also create new questions. The edge of knowledge does not disappear. It simply moves. A person who knows almost nothing about a subject may not yet recognize which parts are unexplained. As knowledge increases, the hidden complexity becomes more visible. A clear answer may open into a larger landscape of detail. This does not mean that curiosity always grows endlessly. Interest can fade. A question can lose its importance, or an answer may feel complete enough for the present moment. Attention has limited energy, and daily life continually introduces new concerns. Many small mysteries are noticed and then released without being solved, yet some questions remain. They may return when a related image, word, or experience appears. A person may wonder for years why a certain childhood memory feels unusually vivid, why a particular place seems familiar, or how a simple natural process works. The question rests quietly until something brings it forward again. Psychologists sometimes describe unfinished goals or incomplete tasks as having a special tendency to remain mentally accessible. The exact strength of this effect varies, and not every incomplete matter stays active. Still, ordinary experience suggests that an unresolved question can be easier to recall than one that has been fully settled. An unfinished melody invites its final note. A sentence that stops midway seems to continue in imagination. A puzzle with one missing piece draws the eye toward the empty space. The mind appears to prefer a certain degree of coherence. It tries to connect events, causes, meanings, and consequences. When a connection is missing, curiosity may encourage further search. But this search is not always tense. An unanswered question can feel peaceful, especially when there is no immediate need to resolve it. It can remain as a soft opening rather than a demand. Consider looking at the night sky without knowing the name of every star. The unknown does not necessarily disturb the scene. It may deepen it. The darkness between the visible points of light leaves room for wonder, and the mind can rest near the question without forcing an answer. Curiosity and uncertainty are closely related, but they are not the same experience. Uncertainty simply means that something is not known. Curiosity is the movement that sometimes arises in response to that uncertainty. Some forms of uncertainty feel too broad or confusing to invite exploration. If there is no clear way to begin, the mind may turn away. Curiosity often becomes strongest when the gap feels neither too small nor too large. There must be enough understanding to recognize the question, and enough uncertainty to make the answer worth seeking. A sealed box may be intriguing if you know it contains something, but have not been told what. An empty room may be less interesting if there are no clues at all. A story becomes compelling when it provides enough information to form an expectation, then gently withholds the final connection. In this way, curiosity depends on balance. The known provides stability. The unknown provides direction. Between them lies a narrow space where attention can linger. Memory also plays an important role. To notice that something is missing, the mind must compare the present moment with past experience. A sound is unusual because it differs from sounds heard before. An object is puzzling because it does not fit easily into familiar categories. A surprising event stands out because the mind expected something else. Curiosity begins not in emptiness, but against a background of remembered patterns. Every question carries traces of previous knowledge. Even the simplest why or how grows from something already understood. A child who asks why the moon seems to follow the car already knows that the moon is distant. The car is moving, and objects usually appear to change position during travel. The question forms where these observations do not fit together easily. The mind notices the mismatch and stays near it. Perhaps that is why some questions feel almost like small objects held in awareness. They have shape, even without answers. They can be turned over, approached from different sides, and set down for a while before being picked up again. In quiet moments, an unanswered question may remain without urgency. It does not insist on immediate resolution. It simply marks a place where understanding has not yet reached, holding attention at the gentle boundary between what is familiar and what is still waiting to be discovered. Sometimes curiosity begins before a clear question is formed. Attention shifts first, and only afterward does the mind discover what it is looking for. You may notice this while walking through a familiar room. Everything appears ordinary, yet one small detail seems different. A chair has been moved slightly. A book is resting on the wrong shelf. A faint scent is present that was not there before. At first, there may be no sentence in the mind, only a pause. Then the question arrives. What has changed? This sequence reveals something important about curiosity. It is closely connected with the brain's ability to detect novelty and surprise. The mind continually forms quiet predictions about the world. It expects familiar rooms to contain familiar arrangements. It expects common sounds to follow recognizable patterns. It anticipates that objects will behave in ways similar to how they behaved before. These expectations are not usually conscious. You do not need to inspect every chair, window, and shadow each time you enter a room. Past experience allows much of the scene to be processed with little effort. When reality differs from expectation, however, attention may awaken. A small difference can become unusually clear against a stable background. A single dark leaf among pale ones may draw the eye. A pause in the steady rhythm may be more noticeable than the rhythm itself. A bird that usually calls at dawn may attract attention when heard late at night. The unexpected detail carries information. It suggests that the mind's current model of the situation may be incomplete. Curiosity can emerge as an attempt to update that model. This does not mean that every surprise leads to exploration. Some changes are too minor to matter. Others may be understood immediately. If a cup has moved because someone has just used it, the mystery may disappear as quickly as it appeared. But when the cause remains uncertain, attention may stay. The mind begins comparing possibilities. Perhaps the window was left open. Perhaps an animal moved outside. Perhaps the unfamiliar sound came from a pipe cooling in the wall. These possibilities are often formed gently, without deliberate effort. Imagination begins offering explanations before any one of them has been confirmed. In this way, curiosity is connected not only with observation, but also with prediction. To be curious about something is often to sense that more than one explanation is possible. The mind holds these possibilities loosely and looks for details that might help distinguish between them. An unusual object found on a beach may have been shaped by water, made by a person, or formed by a living creature. Each possibility directs attention toward different features. Is the surface regular or uneven? Does it have a repeated pattern? Is it smooth from erosion? Does it resemble anything seen before? The object has not changed, but the act of wondering changes how it is examined. Curiosity slows perception down. Instead of giving the world a quick familiar label, the mind looks again. This second look can reveal details that would otherwise remain unnoticed. A stone is no longer merely a stone. It has layers, edges, faint colors, and a shape produced over time. A sound is no longer simply background noise. It has a beginning, a rhythm, a changing volume, and a location in space. The world becomes more textured when attention is guided by a question. There is something restful in this kind of close observation. It does not always require an answer. Sometimes, the act of looking carefully is satisfying on its own. A person may examine frost on a window without needing to know the exact physics of every branching line. They may watch light move across water without trying to calculate the angles of reflection. Curiosity can be precise, but it can also remain open and contemplative. Scientific inquiry often begins from the same ability to notice that something does not quite match expectation. A shadow falls differently than predicted. A plant grows better in one place than another. A repeated observation contains one unusual result. The difference is not immediately treated as proof of anything. Instead, it becomes a reason to look more carefully. Careful curiosity includes patience. It allows several explanations to remain possible while more information is gathered. This is especially important because the first explanation that comes to mind is not always correct. Human perception is skillful, but it is also influenced by habits, expectations, and incomplete memories. A strange sound may seem closer than it is. A pattern may appear meaningful by coincidence. A surprising event may be remembered more clearly than ordinary events, making it seem more common than it actually is. Curiosity at its most thoughtful does not rush from surprise to certainty. It remains willing to revise. This gentle uncertainty is part of learning. The mind notices a mismatch, forms a possibility, examines new details, and adjusts its understanding. Sometimes the original expectation was nearly correct and needs only a small change. At other times, the new information requires a more complete rethinking. Even ordinary life contains countless examples. A recipe behaves differently on a humid day. A familiar route seems shorter when walked in conversation. A plant turns gradually toward a window. A pet responds to a sound that a human barely notices. Each observation can become a small invitation to ask how and why. Most of these invitations pass without being followed. Attention cannot investigate everything. Curiosity selects. What it selects depends partly on what feels meaningful. A question connected with a personal interest often holds attention longer. Someone interested in weather may notice cloud shapes that others overlook. Someone who enjoys language may pause over the history of an unusual word. Someone who repairs machines may hear a subtle change in an engine before anyone else does. Knowledge makes certain kinds of novelty visible. This may seem surprising. It is easy to imagine that curiosity is strongest when a subject is completely new. Yet previous knowledge often provides the structure needed to recognize that something is unusual. A beginner may see a collection of similar shells. A specialist may see differences in age, habitat, growth, and form. Greater familiarity does not always make the world less interesting. It can reveal finer mysteries. The more carefully something is known, the more precisely its unanswered questions may appear. Still, curiosity also benefits from moments when familiar categories loosen. An ordinary object may seem new when seen from an unusual angle. A daily sound may become interesting when heard alone in a quiet room. A common question may feel different when considered slowly. Why does the sky darken gradually rather than all at once? Why does a remembered place seem smaller when visited years later? Why can a name be almost available in memory, yet remain just beyond reach? Such questions arise from experiences so familiar that they are usually accepted without notice. Curiosity makes the ordinary visible again. It interrupts the automatic movement of attention and creates a small clearing around one detail. Within that clearing, the mind compares expectation with experience. It notices what fits, what does not, and what might still be missing. The feeling may be so slight that it is barely recognized. A pause. A second glance. A thought that returns after a few moments. Yet this quiet response to novelty is one of the ways understanding changes. The mind does not need to reject everything it already knows. It simply makes room for the possibility that the world contains another detail, another pattern, or another explanation that has not yet been noticed. And when that possibility remains open, attention often stays nearby, waiting for the next clue. When attention remains near a question, the experience can begin to carry a quiet sense of anticipation. The answer is not yet known, but it feels as though it may be reachable. A few more details, another careful look, or one new piece of information might bring the pattern into focus. This anticipation is part of what makes curiosity motivating. The mind is not drawn toward every unknown thing equally. A mystery tends to hold attention more strongly when the answer seems meaningful, useful, or satisfying in some way. The usefulness may be practical, as when someone tries to understand why a device has stopped working. It may be social, as when a person wonders what another person meant by a particular expression. Or it may simply be the pleasure of bringing a loose collection of details into a clearer pattern. There is often a small reward in understanding. You may have felt it when a difficult sentence suddenly becomes clear, when the final piece of a puzzle fits into place, or when the source of an unfamiliar sound is finally discovered. The world has not necessarily changed, yet the relationship between its parts feels more orderly than it did a moment before. Research suggests that curiosity can engage brain systems involved in motivation, learning, attention, and reward. These systems help the mind decide which information is worth pursuing and which experiences may be useful to remember. But it would be too simple to say that curiosity is caused by one chemical, or that every question produces the same response. Curiosity is a whole mental state, shaped by expectation, emotion, knowledge, memory, and context. The reward is not always found only at the end. The search itself can be pleasant. Turning an unfamiliar object in the light, following a trail through a book, or slowly testing possible explanations may hold attention even before an answer appears. This may be why some people enjoy solving problems that have no practical importance. A riddle, a hidden pattern, or an obscure historical question may offer no immediate advantage. Yet the movement from uncertainty toward understanding can still feel worthwhile. The mind appears to value information for more than one reason. New knowledge can help predict what will happen. It can make future choices easier. It can connect separate memories. It can reduce confusion or reveal possibilities that were not previously visible. Sometimes information is useful because it changes action. At other times, it is useful because it changes perception. Learning why the sky becomes red near sunset does not alter the sunset itself. But afterward, the scene may be experienced differently. Light passing through more of the atmosphere, shorter wavelengths scattering away, and warmer colors remaining visible can become part of what the eye now sees. The scientific explanation does not have to remove wonder. It can add another layer to it. Curiosity often moves through this exchange between mystery and understanding. The unknown invites attention. Learning offers a partial answer. The answer then changes what can be noticed, making new questions possible. A person who learns a little about clouds may begin seeing different forms where they once saw only a gray sky. Someone who learns how bread rises may notice temperature, timing, and texture more carefully. Someone who discovers how birds navigate may look at migration with a different sense of scale and complexity. Knowledge can make the familiar world feel newly detailed. This is one reason curiosity supports learning so effectively. When the mind is already seeking an answer, incoming information has a purpose. It is not simply another fact among many. It belongs to an open question. Imagine hearing two explanations of the same phenomenon. One arrives without context, while the other arrives after you have spent time wondering about it. The second explanation may feel more vivid because the mind has already prepared a place for it. The question has organized attention in advance. It may also influence memory. Information related to a curious state is often more likely to be processed deeply, especially when it resolves something the mind has been actively considering. The answer connects with expectation, surprise, and prior knowledge, giving it more pathways through which it may later be recalled. This does not mean that curiosity makes memory perfect. Details can still be forgotten, confused, or changed over time. An interesting answer may be remembered while its source disappears. A surprising claim may remain vivid even when it is inaccurate. Curiosity helps open the door to learning, but careful judgment is still needed once information arrives. The desire for an answer can sometimes make the first available explanation feel more convincing than it should. When uncertainty has lasted for a while, resolution itself may be satisfying. This can encourage the mind to accept a neat story too quickly. Thoughtful curiosity, therefore, includes a willingness to pause. It asks not only whether an explanation feels satisfying, but whether it fits the evidence. It allows uncertainty to remain when the available answer is incomplete. It can enjoy a possibility without mistaking it for certainty. There is a gentle maturity in this kind of curiosity. It does not demand that every mystery become simple. Some questions require many observations. Some answers remain provisional. Some subjects grow more complex the longer they are studied. The ocean can be measured, mapped, and described, yet still contain unknown species and poorly understood processes. Memory can be examined through careful experiments, yet the experience of remembering remains rich and variable. The night sky can be observed with extraordinary instruments, while new questions continue to appear at the limits of what can be detected. Understanding and mystery can exist together. In everyday life, this balance is often easy to overlook. A quick search may provide an answer within seconds. A device can identify a song, translate a phrase, or explain an unfamiliar term almost immediately. This access to information is useful, but it can shorten the quiet interval in which a question develops. Sometimes, before seeking the answer, the mind naturally begins to explore. What might the explanation be? What is already known? Which details seem important? What would make one possibility more likely than another? Even a brief pause can reveal the structure of curiosity. The question begins to connect with memory. Possible answers appear. Attention selects clues. The mind feels the difference between guessing and knowing. This interval does not need to be long. It may last only a few moments while looking at an unfamiliar shape in the sky or listening to a sound outside a window. Yet during those moments, the mind is doing more than waiting. It is building a path toward understanding. Perhaps the deepest reward of curiosity is not simply the arrival of a fact. It is the feeling that the world has become slightly more connected. One detail now belongs with another. An event has a cause. A pattern has a name. A question that once floated without direction has found a place within a larger picture. And still, the picture remains unfinished. At its edges are other questions, some clear and some barely formed. The satisfaction of one answer does not close the mind. It often makes the surrounding unknown more visible, leaving attention gently poised between what has just been learned and what has only begun to be wondered about. A question that remains in the mind often begins to influence movement. Attention turns toward the unknown, and then the body may follow in small, almost unremarkable ways. A person leans closer to examine an object, walks toward a distant sound, opens a drawer, turns a page, or looks behind something that blocks the view. Curiosity becomes exploration. Exploration does not always mean traveling to distant places. It can happen within a room, along a familiar path, or inside a single idea. It is simply the act of gathering information beyond what is already available. Imagine entering a quiet building and noticing a closed door at the end of a corridor. The door itself may be ordinary, yet because it prevents the space beyond it from being seen, it creates a natural boundary between the known and the unknown. You know where the corridor leads, but not what continues behind the door. The barrier gives the missing information a location. A closed door is often more interesting than an open one because it limits perception. Once the door opens and the room becomes visible, curiosity may quickly fade. The answer may be simple. Another office, an empty storage space, or a staircase leading down. The mystery existed partly because the information was hidden. Many ordinary objects produce the same effect. A wrapped package conceals its contents. A lid hides the inside of a box. A bend in a trail blocks the view ahead. A sealed envelope contains words that cannot yet be read. In each case, curiosity responds to the possibility that useful or meaningful information lies just beyond the present senses. The urge to explore depends on more than the unknown itself. The mind also considers whether exploration feels possible and safe. A quiet drawer may invite opening. A distant room in a familiar house may invite a closer look. But when uncertainty is connected with possible danger, caution may become stronger than curiosity. These responses are not opposites. Both curiosity and caution help guide behavior in uncertain situations. One encourages the gathering of information, while the other protects against moving too quickly. A person may pause before opening the door. They may listen first. They may look for familiar signs or remember what usually lies nearby. Exploration often begins with this balance between approach and restraint. The same balance appears in learning. A subject that is slightly unfamiliar may feel inviting because it offers something new while still containing recognizable ideas. A subject that is completely incomprehensible may be harder to approach. Without any familiar structure, the mind may not know what to ask or where to begin. This is why explanations often work best when they connect new information with something already understood. A new idea becomes easier to explore when it is attached to a familiar experience, image, or pattern. To understand the movement of planets, one might first imagine objects traveling along curved paths. To understand memory, one might begin with the ordinary experience of trying to recall a name. To understand sound, one might notice the vibration of a string. The familiar idea acts like a path leading into unfamiliar ground. Curiosity moves gradually along that path. It rarely gathers everything at once. Instead, each observation changes what can be asked next. Someone examining an unusual shell may first notice its shape. Then they may wonder how it grew. Learning that the shell was made by a living animal may lead to questions about where the animal lived, what it ate, and why the shell has a particular pattern. Exploration develops through layers. This process can be seen in the simplest forms of investigation. A person hears a tapping sound near a window. They look outside and see nothing. They wait and hear it again. The sound seems to occur when the wind rises. A thin branch is moving against the glass. The answer arrives through repeated observation. Before the source is found, the person may have considered several possibilities. Rain, an insect, movement inside the wall, or an object shifting on the windowsill. Each possibility creates a different expectation. If it is rain, the sound may become more frequent. If it is a branch, it may follow the wind. If it comes from inside, opening the window may not change it. Even without formal scientific training, the mind can compare these quiet predictions with experience. This kind of everyday exploration resembles scientific reasoning in a simple form. A question is noticed. Possible explanations are considered. Information is gathered. Some possibilities become less likely, and others fit the observations more closely. Careful investigation does not require certainty at the beginning. It only requires a willingness to observe what happens. Sometimes the answer is found quickly. At other times, exploration produces only a better question. The tapping may stop before its source is seen. The unusual object may remain unidentified. A pattern may appear to have several possible causes. Not every search ends with resolution. Curiosity can continue even when information is incomplete. In fact, partial knowledge may sometimes strengthen it. A single clue can make the unknown feel more reachable than it did before. Seeing footprints without seeing the animal may invite more questions than seeing nothing at all. Finding one page from an old letter may create a larger mystery than finding no letter. A fragment suggests that a fuller story exists. The mind begins to imagine the missing whole. Imagination often accompanies exploration because the senses can reveal only what is present. To consider what might lie beyond the visible, the mind uses memory to construct possibilities. Behind a closed door could be a quiet room, a staircase, or another corridor. Beyond the bend in a path could be a field, a stream, or simply more trees. Most imagined possibilities will not match reality exactly, but they give curiosity something to work with. They help the mind prepare for discovery. When the answer is finally revealed, it can be compared with what was imagined. If it matches expectation, the mind gains confidence in its understanding. If it differs, the surprise may become another source of curiosity. Exploration, therefore, creates a continuing conversation between prediction and experience. The world offers a detail. The mind forms a possibility. A closer look provides another detail. the possibility changes. Through this gentle cycle, understanding becomes more accurate and more richly connected. Much of human knowledge has grown through repeated acts of looking beyond what was immediately available. People followed rivers to discover where they led, watched the night sky across many seasons, examined plants, compared stones, recorded changing weather, and noticed patterns in the movements of animals. Yet the basic movement of curiosity remains present in much smaller moments. It appears whenever attention crosses a boundary. A cover is lifted. A question is asked. An object is viewed from another side. A familiar experience is examined instead of being accepted without thought. Exploration begins with the sense that the present view is not the only view possible, and somewhere beyond what can already be seen, heard, or understood, there may be one more detail waiting quietly to change the shape of the question. Exploration often leaves behind more than an answer. It changes the way later experiences are understood. Once the mind has looked closely at something, compared possibilities, and discovered a useful connection, that connection can become part of memory. The next time a similar question appears, the mind does not begin from the same place. A person who once followed a tapping sound to a branch moving against a window may recognize the pattern more quickly on another windy night. Someone who has learned to identify a particular bird may notice its call before seeing it. A child who has discovered that turning a stone can reveal insects beneath it may begin looking at other stones with a new expectation. Curiosity gradually builds a background of knowledge from which future curiosity can grow. Learning is sometimes described as the gathering of facts, but much of it involves changes in relationships. A new detail becomes connected with something familiar. An observation is linked to a cause. A word is joined to a meaning, a place, an image, or a feeling. These connections make information easier to use. Imagine finding an unfamiliar key in a drawer. At first, it is simply a small metal object without a clear purpose. You may notice its shape and wonder what it opens. Later, you discover that it belongs to an old cabinet in another room. The key has not changed, but its place in your understanding has. It now belongs to a larger pattern: the drawer, the cabinet, the lock, and perhaps the reason the key was stored there. If you encounter it again, you are less likely to see only an isolated object. Memory supplies the missing context. Curiosity often supports this kind of connected learning because it encourages the mind to ask where a new detail belongs. What does this resemble? How is it different? What caused it? What might happen next? Where has something like this appeared before? These questions guide the formation of associations. The answer becomes attached to the path that led toward it. This may help explain why information discovered through active interest can feel more vivid than information received without context. When a person has been wondering about something, the mind has already begun arranging related ideas. The new information enters a structure that is waiting for it. A name learned after noticing an unusual flower may be remembered with its color, scent, location, and shape. A fact about the moon may become linked to a particular evening when its position first seemed puzzling. An explanation of echoes may remain connected to the memory of calling into an empty hall. The learning is not separate from the experience of curiosity. They become part of the same memory. Of course, Not every interesting moment is remembered. Attention can wander, details can fade, and new experiences can interfere with old ones. Memory is selective and reconstructive, rather than a perfect recording. Still, curiosity can encourage deeper attention, and deeper attention gives the mind more detail from which a memory may later be rebuilt. When something feels worth understanding, a person may spend longer with it. They may examine it from several angles, repeat the information, imagine possible explanations, or connect it with earlier knowledge. Each of these activities creates additional pathways through which the experience may be recalled. A single fact may be fragile. A fact joined to a question, an image, a prediction, and a moment of recognition has more support. This is visible in ordinary conversation. You may forget many statements heard during a day, yet remember the answer to something you had genuinely wanted to know. The answer carries the shape of the earlier uncertainty. It is remembered not only as information, but as resolution. Sometimes the question itself remains more memorable than the answer. A person may clearly recall wondering why leaves change color in autumn, while the scientific explanation becomes incomplete over time. They remember that sunlight, pigments, temperature, and seasonal change were involved, but not every detail. This is not a failure of curiosity. It shows that memory preserves different parts of an experience with different strength. The emotional tone of discovery may remain. The location may remain. The sense of surprise may remain. Later, these fragments can awaken the question again, leading to renewed learning. In this way, curiosity can return in cycles. A subject first encountered in childhood may become interesting again many years later. A simple explanation that once seemed complete may now feel too small. Greater experience creates new questions that could not have been formed before. Consider the night sky. A young observer may first wonder why the moon changes shape. After learning about its orbit and the changing angle of sunlight, another question may emerge. Why does the same side usually face Earth? Later still, curiosity may turn toward tides, eclipses, craters, or the formation of the moon itself. Each layer of understanding becomes the foundation for another. The earlier answer is not discarded. It becomes part of the structure that allows a more precise question to appear. This is one reason knowledge does not necessarily reduce wonder. Familiarity can quiet some mysteries, but it can also reveal finer ones. The closer the mind looks, the more distinctions it becomes able to notice. A forest that once seemed like a single mass of green may gradually separate into species, seasons, patterns of growth, traces of animals, and changes in light. A piece of music may reveal rhythm, harmony, repetition, variation, and silence. A familiar face may contain countless small expressions that become meaningful through long observation. Learning sharpens the edges of perception. Yet there is also value in forgetting enough to see something freshly. Memory helps organize the world, but its categories can become automatic. Once an object has been named, the mind may stop examining it closely. A cup becomes simply a cup. A tree becomes simply a tree. Rain becomes a familiar sound that no longer asks for attention. Curiosity can interrupt this quick recognition. It can make the mind pause before the label feels complete. What kind of tree is it? Why does the bark form those shapes? Why do some drops of rain strike the window more heavily than others? Why does the cup feel warmer near the top than at its base? The familiar object becomes detailed again. This gentle return to observation does not require unusual intelligence or special training. It begins with allowing a known thing to remain partly open. There may always be another way to describe it, another relationship to notice, or another question hidden inside what seemed fully understood. Memory gives the mind a map of what has already been learned. Curiosity approaches the edges of that map and notices where its lines become faint. Sometimes it extends them with a clear answer. Sometimes it adds only a small mark, a possibility, or a reminder to look again. And each quiet addition becomes part of the background from which the next question will eventually rise. Curiosity does not always remain as a private feeling. At some point, the quiet awareness of something missing may take the form of a question. A question gives uncertainty a shape. Before words appear, the mind may only sense that an object, event, or explanation is incomplete. There is a pause, a second glance, or a faint impression that something does not fit. Then language gathers around the feeling. What is this? Where did it come from? How does it work? Why did that happen? The unknown becomes easier to examine once it can be named. Questions are among the simplest tools the mind uses to direct exploration. They narrow a wide field of uncertainty into something attention can approach. Wondering about the entire sky may feel almost limitless. Asking why the sky appears blue creates a smaller path through that mystery. The question does not yet provide the answer, but it suggests which details may matter. Different questions guide attention in different ways. Asking what something is encourages identification. Asking where it came from turns attention toward origins. Asking how it works invites a search for processes and relationships. Asking why something happened may lead toward causes, purposes, or explanations. Even a slight change in wording can change the direction of thought. Imagine finding a smooth, pale object beside a river. Asking, "What is it?" may lead you to compare it with stones, shells, bones, or pieces of wood. Asking, "How did it become so smooth?" directs attention toward water, friction, movement, and time. Asking, "Why is it here?" opens another path, perhaps involving the river's current, weather, or the shape of the land upstream. The object remains still, but each question reveals a different part of its possible story. Language allows curiosity to become more precise. It also allows curiosity to travel between minds. A person can ask someone else what they have seen, learned, or understood. Information no longer needs to be discovered entirely through direct experience. One person's question can draw upon another person's memory. One observation can be shared, examined, and extended. Much of human learning grows through this exchange. A child asks why shadows become longer in the evening. Someone answers that the sun appears lower in the sky. The answer may satisfy the first question, but it may also lead to another. Why does the sun seem to move? Why is it lower at some times than others? Why do days become shorter in winter? A single spoken question can unfold into a quiet chain of thought. The repeated questions of childhood are often treated as signs of simple curiosity, yet they reveal something complex. A child is gradually learning not only facts about the world, but also the kinds of explanations that exist. Some things can be explained by immediate causes. A cup fell because it was pushed. Some require understanding a process that unfolds over time. Ice melts as it absorbs heat from its surroundings. Other questions lead towards systems that cannot be seen directly, such as the movement of planets, the growth of plants, or the formation of weather. Each answer teaches something about how explanations are built. Children often explore with both words and actions. They ask what will happen, then touch, turn, stack, pour, open, or repeat. They test the difference between objects that float and objects that sink. They drop the same item more than once, as though checking whether the world will behave consistently. Repetition is not always a sign that the first experience was forgotten. It may be a way of finding out whether a pattern is dependable. The mind learns through variation. What happens if the object is heavier? What if the surface is softer? What if the container is fuller? These questions may never be spoken, but they are expressed through behavior. Adults continue to explore in similar ways, although the process may appear more controlled. A cook changes one ingredient and notices the result. A gardener moves a plant nearer to a window. A mechanic listens to a machine under different conditions. A reader returns to an earlier page to see whether a later detail changes its meaning. Each small adjustment asks the world a question. In this sense, questions are not limited to sentences. An experiment is a question arranged through action. An observation repeated at another time is a question asked again under new conditions. A comparison between two objects asks how they are alike and how they differ. Curiosity becomes visible through the structure of the search. Yet not every question has a clear answer. Some are too broad. Some depend on information that is unavailable. And some change as understanding develops. The mind may begin by asking why a person made a certain choice, only to discover that many motives, memories, and circumstances were involved. A good question does not always produce a simple conclusion. Sometimes its value lies in making hidden complexity easier to see. This is especially true when curiosity turns toward other people. A familiar expression, an unexpected silence, or a story from someone's past may invite questions. Human behavior rarely has only one cause, and thoughtful curiosity leaves room for more than one interpretation. It can ask without assuming that the first answer is complete. There is a difference between curiosity that opens understanding and curiosity that merely seeks confirmation. When the mind already prefers a particular explanation, it may notice only the details that support it. A more patient question allows the answer to be surprising. What happened here? What else could explain it? What information is still missing? These questions create space around certainty. They remind the mind that not knowing is not a failure. It is often the beginning of careful attention. The words, why and how, can remain quietly active for a long time. They may accompany an observation through several days, or return after years. An ordinary experience can become newly interesting when a different question is applied to it. A person may have watched rain many times before wondering why drops leave separate trails on one window but merge together on another. They may have heard their own voice in recordings for years before, asking why it sounds unfamiliar. They may have passed the same old building without ever wondering who designed it or what once stood in its place. The world does not always need to change for curiosity to appear. Sometimes only the question changes, and once a question has found its words, The mind may continue carrying it softly, noticing fragments that seem related, returning to the empty place and understanding, and waiting for an answer that may arrive slowly, one detail at a time. Not every unanswered question feels inviting. Some uncertainties draw the mind closer, while others make attention drift away. The difference often depends on whether the unknown feels understandable, manageable, and connected to something already familiar. A faint light moving across a distant hillside may awaken curiosity because it offers a clear but incomplete event. Something is there. It is moving. Its source is not yet known. The mind has enough information to begin forming possibilities. A large subject with no obvious starting point can feel different. If every detail is unfamiliar and no pattern can be recognized, curiosity may have little structure to follow. The unknown becomes too wide to hold comfortably in attention. Curiosity often grows in the space between complete certainty and complete confusion. When too little is missing, the answer may seem obvious. When too much is missing, there may be no clear question. Between these extremes lies a region where the mind can sense both what it knows and what it might soon discover. You may notice this while working on a simple puzzle. If almost every piece is already in place, the remaining gap may be solved quickly without much thought. If all the pieces appear identical and there is no visible image to guide them, the task may feel difficult to enter. But when part of the pattern can be seen and a few sections remain unfinished, attention often stays nearby. The visible pattern gives the missing pieces meaning. A similar balance shapes learning. New information is often easiest to approach when it connects with existing knowledge. A completely unfamiliar subject may first appear as a field of disconnected names and details. After a few basic ideas become clear, the same subject may begin to feel more interesting. The mind now has places to attach what comes next. Someone who knows nothing about the deep ocean may see only darkness and unfamiliar creatures. After learning about pressure, temperature, light, and the way life adapts to different depths, each new creature becomes part of a larger question. How does it find food? How does it communicate? Why does it have that particular shape? The subject has not become smaller. It has become more organized. Organization makes uncertainty easier to explore. It allows the mind to divide one large unknown into several smaller ones. Instead of trying to understand everything at once, attention can rest on a single detail. This may be one reason curiosity changes as knowledge grows. At the beginning, the questions are broad. What is this? How does it work? Later, they become more precise. Why does this process happen under one condition but not another? Why does one example differ from the rest? Greater knowledge can produce deeper uncertainty. But it also makes that uncertainty more clearly defined. There is comfort in a well-shaped question. It marks the edge of understanding without making the entire world feel uncertain. The mind generally prefers some degree of predictability. Familiar routines, recognizable places, and repeated patterns reduce the need to examine every detail. They allow attention to move with less effort. Curiosity introduces a small disturbance into this predictability. Something does not quite match. A detail is absent. An event occurs earlier than expected. A familiar object behaves in an unfamiliar way. The disturbance is noticeable, but it does not need to threaten the larger sense of order. A single surprising note within a gentle melody can draw attention without destroying the music. A new flower beside a familiar path can invite a closer look without making the path itself feel strange. A small mystery can exist within a stable setting. This balance allows uncertainty to feel interesting rather than overwhelming. People differ in how they respond to it. Some enjoy open questions for a long time. Others prefer to resolve them quickly. The same person may react differently depending on mood, experience, energy, and context. A mystery encountered during a peaceful afternoon may feel pleasant. The same uncertainty during a demanding day may feel like another unfinished task. Curiosity is not separate from the condition of the person experiencing it. When attention is tired, a complicated question may be released. When the mind feels calm and supported, it may have more space to explore. This does not make one response better than another. Curiosity naturally rises and falls. It is shaped by the resources available in a particular moment. Sometimes a question remains attractive precisely because it does not need an immediate answer. It can be carried lightly. You may wonder how an old house looked when it was first built, who walked through its rooms, or how the surrounding landscape has changed. There may be no practical way to know every detail. Still, the question adds depth to the place. The unknown becomes part of the experience rather than a problem to remove. Other questions feel different because action depends on them. Why has the sound stopped? Which path leads home? What caused the machine to fail? In such cases, uncertainty can create urgency, and curiosity becomes closely connected with problem solving. The mind searches not only because the information is interesting, but because it may guide a decision. Yet even practical curiosity often uses the same quiet processes. Attention narrows. Possible explanations are compared. Memory provides earlier examples. New details are examined for relevance. The emotional tone may change, but the search still moves from incomplete understanding toward a clearer model of what is happening. Curiosity can also soften uncertainty by turning it into observation. Instead of facing one large unknown, the mind begins noticing specific details. A strange sound has a rhythm. An unfamiliar object has weight, texture, and shape. A difficult idea contains several smaller claims. A confusing event has a sequence that can be reconstructed. Each detail creates a small point of stability. This is how exploration often proceeds, not by removing uncertainty all at once, but by giving it structure. One observation becomes reliable. One possibility is ruled out. One connection becomes clearer. The unknown gradually changes form. At first, it may feel like a blank space. Later, it becomes a landscape with a few recognizable features. There are still areas that cannot be seen, but the mind now knows where it is standing. Perhaps curiosity feels gentle when it allows this gradual movement. It does not demand that uncertainty disappear immediately. It simply brings attention close enough to notice its shape. A question can remain open without being empty. It can contain memories, expectations, clues, and several possible directions. In the quietest form of curiosity, the mind rests beside the unknown rather than rushing through it. It recognizes that understanding may arrive slowly, and that each new detail may alter the question itself. The unfinished space is no longer only an absence. It becomes a place where attention can wait, compare, imagine, and begin to learn. Curiosity sometimes appears when the world becomes quieter. During a busy day, attention may be occupied by messages, conversations, decisions, movement, and familiar tasks. Questions can arise, but many of them disappear before they have time to develop. The mind notices something briefly, then turns toward the next demand. In a slower moment, a small question may remain. Perhaps you are waiting for water to boil, watching rain gather on a window, or sitting in a room where nothing requires an immediate response. The surroundings offer little that is new. At first, this reduction in activity may feel like boredom. Boredom is often described as the uncomfortable feeling of wanting to be engaged while finding nothing that seems worth engaging with. It is not simply the absence of activity. A person can be busy and still feel bored if the activity does not hold attention. Another person can be completely still and feel deeply absorbed in a thought, a sound, or a view. The important difference lies in whether attention has found something meaningful to rest upon. Curiosity can sometimes provide that meaning. When the immediate environment becomes repetitive, the mind may begin searching for variation. It notices small details that were previously overlooked, a pattern in the ceiling, the changing rhythm of rain, the movement of steam, or the faint differences between familiar sounds may become more visible. Nothing has necessarily changed in the surroundings. The threshold for what counts as interesting has changed. The mind begins looking more closely. This does not mean boredom always becomes curiosity. Sometimes it leads only to restlessness or distraction. A person may seek any new stimulus without caring what it contains. They may move quickly from one activity to another, hoping that something will finally hold attention. Curiosity is more focused. It does not seek novelty alone. It begins to form a relationship with a particular object, idea, or question. A bored mind may ask, "Is there anything different?" A curious mind gradually asks, "What is different about this?" That transition can be very subtle. Imagine waiting in a quiet station late in the evening. The same announcements have ended. The platform is nearly empty, and the clock seems to move slowly. At first, there may be only the awareness of waiting. Then attention settles on the rails. Their polished surfaces reflect distant light. Small stones lie between the wooden or concrete supports. The tracks seem to narrow as they extend into the darkness. A question may arise. Why do parallel lines appear to meet in the distance? Or perhaps the mind wonders how the rails expand and contract with changing temperatures, how trains remain guided through curves, or where the line continues beyond sight. The waiting has not ended, but its texture has changed. Curiosity has given attention a direction. Periods of low stimulation can make room for this shift because the mind is not continually responding to strong external demands. Memory begins to wander. Earlier questions return. New connections form between ideas that were not previously considered together. A person folding laundry may suddenly wonder why some fabrics dry faster than others. While walking the same route as usual, they may begin thinking about how street trees survive in narrow spaces. During a quiet meal, they may notice that taste changes as food cools. Routine does not always reduce curiosity. Sometimes, routine creates a stable background against which a new detail can stand out. Repeated experience also allows comparison. When the same place, object, or activity is encountered many times, small changes become easier to recognize. A tree looks slightly different after rain. A room sounds different when curtains are removed. A familiar path has a new scent when the season changes. These differences may be too subtle to notice during a first encounter. Familiarity gives the mind a reference point, yet too much repetition can make attention automatic. Once the mind believes it already understands a situation, it may stop examining it. The route is known, the task is known, and the object has already been given a name. Curiosity can return when something interrupts this automatic recognition. The interruption may come from the outside through a surprising detail, but it can also come from within through a new question. Why is this ordinary object shaped this way? How many times has this path changed without being noticed? What happens inside a familiar machine when a button is pressed? Why does a repeated task sometimes feel calming and at other times tiring? A different question can make a familiar experience unfamiliar again. This ability is closely related to perspective. When attention changes its point of view, the same object can reveal another set of features. A spoon may be considered as a tool, a curved reflective surface, a piece of metal shaped by heat and pressure, or an object designed to fit the movement of a hand. A window may be seen as part of a wall, a source of light, a barrier to weather, or a surface that creates reflections after dark. None of these views is the only correct one. Each selects a different relationship. Curiosity often grows when the mind allows an ordinary thing to have more than one description. This does not require pretending that everything is mysterious. Familiar knowledge remains useful. A spoon is still a spoon, and a window is still a window. But the familiar name does not contain every fact about the object. There is always more detail than the label can hold. The same is true of routine experiences. Walking, drinking water, recognizing a voice, finding balance, or remembering where an object was placed all involve processes so dependable that they usually pass without question. Their familiarity hides their complexity. A quiet moment may loosen that familiarity just enough for curiosity to enter. The mind pauses beside something it has experienced many times and notices that knowing how to use it is not the same as understanding everything about it. You know that sleep returns each night, yet the fading of awareness remains difficult to observe directly. You know that a memory can appear suddenly, yet its path into consciousness may be unclear. You know that a familiar voice can be recognized after only a few words, though the exact features that make it recognizable are not always easy to describe. Ordinary life is filled with abilities that work before they are explained. Boredom, repetition, and quiet waiting can sometimes expose these unnoticed mysteries. When the surface of experience becomes still, the mind may begin to see the depth beneath it. A question emerges not because the world has offered a dramatic surprise, but because attention has finally remained in one place long enough to notice that the familiar is not completely known. And in that small opening, a routine moment can become an invitation to look again. Curiosity can be directed toward objects, places, and natural events, but it can also turn toward other minds. A pause in conversation, an unfamiliar expression, a change in tone, or a story told only in part may create the same gentle sense of missing information. Another person is always partly known and partly unknown. You may understand someone's habits, preferences, and familiar ways of speaking, yet still wonder what they are thinking in a particular moment. A friend becomes quiet while looking through an old box. A neighbor begins caring carefully for a plant that has appeared on the windowsill. Someone mentions a journey from many years ago, then changes the subject before explaining what happened. These small gaps can awaken social curiosity. Social curiosity is the desire to understand other people, what they know, what they have experienced, what they intend, and how they see the world. It supports conversation, cooperation, learning, and the gradual formation of relationships. Unlike a closed box or an unfamiliar sound, however, another person cannot be understood simply by examining more closely. Human thoughts and feelings are not directly visible. They must be approached through language, behavior, context, and trust. This makes social curiosity both useful and delicate. A question can invite someone to share, but it can also feel intrusive if asked without care. Curiosity about another person works best when it is accompanied by respect for boundaries and an acceptance that not every unknown detail belongs to us. The desire to understand does not create an automatic right to know. Thoughtful curiosity leaves room for silence. It recognizes that a person may answer fully, answer partly, or choose not to answer at all. The unknown can remain without becoming a problem. When curiosity is welcomed, it can deepen attention. Instead of preparing the next thing to say, a listener begins to notice the details of another person's experience. What did the place look like? What happened afterward? How did the person understand it at the time? Has that understanding changed? Questions like these do more than gather information. They help reveal how one event can be experienced from a perspective different from our own. Two people may walk through the same street and remember different things. One notices the buildings and signs. Another remembers the weather, the sounds, or a brief conversation. Their memories are shaped by attention, emotion, knowledge, and personal meaning. Curiosity allows these different versions of the same world to meet. This is one of its quiet social gifts. It reminds the mind that its own view is not the only available view. A familiar place may become unfamiliar through someone else's description. A daily custom may reveal a history that was previously unnoticed. An object that seemed ordinary may carry deep meaning for the person who has kept it. Imagine asking someone why a small, worn bowl remains on a shelf long after newer dishes have replaced it. From the outside, it may appear unremarkable. The answer might reveal that it belonged to a grandparent, traveled from another country, or was used during an important period of life. The object has not physically changed, but curiosity has uncovered another layer of reality around it. Much of social learning happens in this way. Stories transfer knowledge that one person could not gain through direct experience alone. They carry descriptions of distant places, earlier generations, difficult decisions, unexpected mistakes, and discoveries made slowly over time. A listener can borrow another person's perspective for a while. Human beings have long learned through this exchange. Before written records, knowledge about seasons, animals, landscapes, tools, and social customs could be passed through observation and spoken explanation. Questions: helped younger or less experienced members of a group. Find out where water might be located, which plants could be used, how materials should be shaped, and why certain practices mattered. Curiosity, therefore, supports more than individual discovery. It allows knowledge to move across communities and generations. Yet social information is not always reliable. People forget, simplify, interpret, and reshape experiences as they remember them. A confidently told story may still be incomplete. A rumor can satisfy curiosity quickly while providing little accurate understanding. The desire to know can make private or dramatic information especially attractive, even when it is uncertain or unkindly shared. Careful social curiosity asks not only whether a story is interesting, but whether it is trustworthy, appropriate, and fair to the people involved. There is a difference between trying to understand someone and treating their life as an object of entertainment. Respectful curiosity tends to be open rather than demanding. It seeks context instead of rushing toward judgment. It allows another person's explanation to complicate the first impression. A quiet expression may not mean sadness. A delayed reply may not mean rejection. An unusual habit may have a history that cannot be guessed from the outside. The mind naturally creates explanations for human behavior because uncertainty about others can feel difficult. But the first interpretation is often only one possibility. Curiosity can soften certainty by asking what else might be true. This does not mean every action must remain mysterious or that judgment is never needed. It simply means that understanding often improves when more context is available. A person who appears careless may be distracted by something unseen. Someone who speaks little may be thoughtful, tired, uncertain, or simply comfortable with silence. The same outward behavior can emerge from many inner states. Social curiosity becomes patient when it remembers this. It listens for detail. It notices contradictions without demanding immediate resolution. It allows people to be more complex than a single action, story, or impression. This patient attention can also turn inward. Sometimes curiosity about others leads the mind to wonder about its own reactions. Why did that comment remain memorable? Why did one person's story feel familiar? Why does a certain kind of silence feel peaceful in one setting and uncomfortable in another? The observer becomes part of the question. Self-curiosity does not require harsh examination. It can be a gentle effort to understand how memories, expectations, and emotions shape perception. A reaction can be noticed without immediately being defended or corrected. Perhaps a familiar scent creates an unexpected feeling. Perhaps a certain place repeatedly draws attention. Perhaps a conversation continues quietly in memory long after it is ended. Instead of demanding a quick explanation, the mind can remain nearby and observe. What does this remind me of? When has this feeling appeared before? Which detail seems to carry the most meaning? The answers may be incomplete. Inner experience is not always easy to translate into words. Yet the questions can make patterns more visible over time. Curiosity about the self and curiosity about others often develop together. The more carefully a person notices their own perspective, the easier it may become to recognize that other perspectives are shaped in equally complex ways. Every mind contains memories that are not visible, questions that are not spoken, and connections that cannot be seen from the outside. A conversation offers only a small opening into this hidden landscape. Through a patient question, a shared story, or a moment of attentive silence, one mind may briefly approach the edge of another. It may not cross the distance completely, and perhaps it never can, but curiosity makes the distance meaningful. It invites the mind to listen without assuming, to wonder without taking possession, and to recognize that behind even the most familiar face lies a world that is still partly unknown. Curiosity often moves beyond what can be seen directly. A few details are present, but the rest must be imagined. You may notice this when looking at an old photograph whose edges reveal more than its center. A doorway appears behind the people, but the room beyond it cannot be seen. A road continues out of the frame. A shadow suggests an object that the camera did not include. The visible scene is complete in one sense, yet the mind naturally extends it. What might have been outside the picture? What happened a few moments before it was taken? Where did the road lead? What did the room look like beyond the doorway? Imagination begins to fill the space that perception cannot reach. Curiosity and imagination often work together in this way. Curiosity identifies an opening in knowledge, while imagination offers possible forms that the missing information might take. The imagined answer is not the same as the true answer, but it helps the mind explore what could be possible. This happens during many ordinary experiences. When footsteps are heard in another room, the mind may picture who is walking there. When a package arrives without explanation, several possible contents may come to mind. When clouds cover the horizon, imagination may continue the landscape beyond them. The mind does not remain empty while waiting for information. It draws upon memory to construct possibilities. These constructions are built from earlier experiences. An imagined room may contain features from other rooms. An unseen animal may be given the shape of animals already known. A future conversation may be assembled from remembered voices, expressions, and situations. Even the most unusual imagined scene is often made from familiar pieces arranged in a new way. This gives imagination an important role in curiosity. It allows the mind to examine possibilities without having to experience each one directly. Before opening a closed door, a person can imagine what may be behind it. Before testing an idea, they can consider what might happen. Before beginning a journey, they can picture several possible routes and outcomes. The imagined possibilities guide attention. If one explanation seems likely, the mind looks for evidence that would support or weaken it. If several possibilities remain, curiosity may become stronger because the answer feels less predictable. Imagine finding a line of small holes in a wooden surface. They may have been made by an insect, a tool, or gradual wear. Each possibility suggests different details to examine. Are the holes equal in size? Do they follow the grain? Is there dust nearby? Do they continue beneath the surface? Imagination creates several paths, and observation helps choose among them. This is not only a feature of casual wondering. It is also part of careful scientific thought. A scientist may observe a pattern and imagine several mechanisms that could produce it. These possibilities become hypotheses that can be compared with evidence. The imaginative step matters because evidence does not always announce its own explanation. Someone must first consider what kinds of causes are possible. Yet imagination must remain connected to reality if it is to support understanding. A possibility can be elegant, vivid, and emotionally satisfying while still being incorrect. The mind is capable of creating convincing stories from very little information. When a pattern is incomplete, imagination may smooth over the missing parts so naturally that the result feels like memory or knowledge. Thoughtful curiosity keeps a quiet distinction between what has been observed and what has been imagined. Perhaps this happened. It could explain the pattern. This is one possibility among several. Such phrases leave room for revision. The ability to imagine without immediately believing is a subtle skill. It allows the mind to explore widely while remaining careful about certainty. In childhood, this movement between curiosity and imagination is especially visible. A cardboard box can become a house, a boat, or a machine. A small opening in the ground may lead, in imagination, to an entire hidden world. A simple question about where insects go at night can expand into invented tunnels, nests, and journeys. The imagined world may not be scientifically accurate, but the curiosity beneath it is meaningful. The child is practicing how to extend beyond the visible, how to form possibilities, and how to connect one idea with another. Over time, some of these possibilities are tested against experience. The insect is observed, the box is altered, the tunnel is examined more closely. Imagination meets the limits and surprises of the physical world. This meeting does not weaken imagination. It gives it structure. A person who learns how birds build nests can imagine more realistic variations. Someone who understands gravity can picture different forms of motion with greater precision. Knowledge adds material from which richer possibilities can be created. Imagination and knowledge are not enemies. Each can enlarge the other. The more the mind knows about a subject, the more detailed its imagined possibilities may become. A person familiar with geology can look at a cliff and imagine layers forming over enormous spans of time. Someone who understands ecology can picture the hidden relationships surrounding a single pond. The scene before them remains quiet and still. Yet imagination extends through processes that cannot be watched directly. No one can observe a mountain forming from beginning to end. No one can stand outside the earth and watch every movement of its surface across millions of years. Understanding such changes requires evidence, measurement, and careful imagination working together. The mind builds an image of events too slow, too distant, too small, or too large to experience in ordinary perception. Curiosity often reaches toward these invisible scales. What is happening inside a seed before it opens? How does a distant star change over time? What does the floor of the ocean look like beyond the range of sunlight? What happens within memory before a forgotten name returns? The questions extend into places the senses cannot enter unaided. In some cases, instruments provide new information. A microscope reveals structures too small for the eye. A telescope gathers light from distant objects. Sensors detect signals that human senses cannot notice directly. But even after data has been collected, the mind must interpret what the data may mean. A faint line on a graph, a repeated change in temperature, or an unusual pattern in an image becomes a clue. Imagination proposes connections. Careful reasoning examines them. More observations are gathered. The process moves between possibility and evidence. In everyday curiosity, the same movement occurs on a smaller scale. You imagine why a plant is leaning, then notice the direction of the light. You wonder why a room feels cooler, then discover a narrow opening near the window. You form an idea about the ending of a story and compare it with the ending that finally arrives. Sometimes the imagined answer is close. Sometimes reality is simpler. Sometimes it is far stranger than anything expected. Surprise occurs when the world refuses to follow the mind's prediction. This can be one of curiosity's quiet pleasures. Imagination prepares a shape for the answer, but the answer changes that shape. The mind must adjust, and in adjusting, it learns. There is no need for imagination to disappear once an answer is found. A new explanation often creates new possible questions. If the plant leans toward light, how does it detect direction? If a room loses heat through a small gap, how much difference can the gap make? If the story ends unexpectedly, which earlier details now appear important? The boundary between the known and the imagined shifts again. Curiosity lives comfortably near this boundary. It allows the mind to travel beyond present knowledge without forgetting where knowledge ends. It builds possible worlds, then returns to observation. It asks what could be true, while remaining willing to discover that something else is true instead. And in that gentle exchange, the unseen does not remain entirely blank. It becomes a field of possibilities, waiting for experience to give some of them form. Surprise often arrives a moment before curiosity. Something happens that the mind did not predict. A familiar object behaves differently, an expected sound does not come, or a pattern continues in an unusual way. For a brief instant, attention becomes sharper. Imagine pouring water into a clear glass and noticing that a small object resting at the bottom appears to shift when viewed from the side. Nothing is moved, yet its position seems different. The change is quiet and harmless, but it does not fit the mind's immediate expectation. That small mismatch may become a question. Why does the object appear displaced? Is the glass changing the image? Is the water bending the light? The surprise lasts only a moment, but curiosity can extend it into observation. The mind depends on prediction more often than we notice. It uses earlier experience to anticipate what will happen next, allowing familiar actions to unfold smoothly. A door is expected to open when its handle is turned. A dropped object is expected to fall. A voice continues with rhythms and sounds that can often be anticipated before the sentence is complete. Most predictions are close enough that they remain invisible. When an expectation is not met, however, the difference becomes informative. It signals that something in the mind's understanding may need to be adjusted. This does not mean that every unexpected event produces a large or conscious reaction. Many small surprises are resolved almost immediately. A sound is identified, a movement is explained, or an overlooked detail becomes visible. The mind updates its expectation and continues, but some surprises leave a residue. A plant appears to grow toward a dark part of a room rather than toward the brightest window. A familiar route takes longer than expected. A heavy-looking object floats while a much smaller one sinks. These observations seem to conflict with the simple rule the mind has been using. Curiosity begins to examine the rule itself. Perhaps the plant is responding to light from another direction. Perhaps the sense of time changed because attention was occupied differently. Perhaps floating depends not only on weight, but also on volume, shape, and the amount of water displaced. The original expectation may not have been entirely wrong. It may simply have been incomplete. Surprise can therefore become an invitation to refine understanding. The mind first notices that reality differs from prediction. It then searches for an explanation that can include both the familiar pattern and the unusual result. A broader idea is needed, one that accounts for more of what has been observed. This process appears in everyday learning and in scientific discovery. A repeated observation creates an expectation. One result does not fit. Instead of being ignored, the difference is examined. Perhaps there was an error. Perhaps a condition changed. Or perhaps the existing explanation needs to be revised. Careful curiosity does not assume that every surprising event reveals a new law of nature. Measurements can be mistaken. Memories can be inaccurate. Coincidences can appear meaningful. Instruments and senses both have limits. The first task is often to observe again. Does the unusual result repeat? Under what conditions does it appear? What remains the same and what has changed? Repetition helps separate a dependable pattern from a momentary accident. You may do this naturally when a lamp flickers. At first, the cause could be almost anything. If it flickers only when the cord is moved, one possibility becomes more likely. If every lamp in the room dims at the same moment, attention turns toward a different cause. Each repeated observation adds structure to the surprise. As the structure becomes clearer, curiosity changes form. The broad question, "Why did that happen?" becomes narrower. Why does it happen only when the cord bends? Or, why does it happen at the same time each evening? Precise questions often emerge from repeated surprise. Unexpected events may also become especially memorable. When something differs from the surrounding pattern, attention tends to focus more strongly upon it. A single red flower in a field of pale ones, an unfamiliar word in a repeated phrase, or an unusual ending to a familiar story may remain in memory because it stood apart. But vividness is not the same as importance. An unusual event may be easier to remember precisely because it is rare. This can sometimes make it feel more common or more meaningful than it really is. The mind remembers the one strange coincidence while forgetting the many ordinary moments when nothing unexpected occurred. Thoughtful curiosity keeps this in mind. It asks whether an event is truly part of a pattern or simply more noticeable because it was surprising. Surprise attracts attention, but careful observation determines what should be learned from it. There is also a softer kind of surprise that does not challenge a rule so much as reveal unexpected detail. A smooth stone contains a thin band of crystal when turned in the light. A plain gray cloud develops a faint rose-colored edge near sunset. A common seed opens into a structure more intricate than its outer surface suggested. These discoveries may not require a complicated explanation. Their pleasure comes from realizing that the familiar world contains more detail than was expected. The mind had formed a simple picture, and reality offered something richer. This gentle expansion can sustain curiosity without urgency. There is no problem to solve, only a reason to look longer. A person may examine the veins of a leaf, the repeating shapes of frost, or the changing reflections in a bowl of water. The observation remains quiet, but each small surprise interrupts automatic recognition. The leaf is no longer only green. Its surface contains branching lines, tiny irregularities, areas of shadow, and signs of growth. Looking carefully reveals that familiar objects are often known only in outline. Curiosity fills in the outline with detail. Surprise can also occur when an answer is simpler than expected. The mysterious sound in the wall is only a pipe cooling. The distant moving light is a reflection from a window. The object thought to be rare is common once its name is known. The resolution may remove the mystery, yet it still teaches something about perception. It reveals how little information was available at the beginning and how easily the mind constructed possibilities around it. The imagined explanations were not foolish. They were attempts to work with incomplete evidence Once the answer appears, the mind can compare prediction with reality. This comparison is a quiet form of learning. It shows which details were useful, which assumptions were misleading, and what might be noticed sooner another time. Surprise is therefore not only a feeling that something unexpected has happened. It is a meeting point between the model in the mind and the world outside it. Sometimes the two fit closely. Sometimes they differ by only a small detail. And sometimes the difference remains long enough for curiosity to settle beside it. The mind does not need to abandon everything it believed before. It can make a small adjustment, widen a category, or hold several possibilities open while more information arrives. In this way, surprise gives curiosity a direction. It marks the place where expectation and experience have separated, and in the quiet space between them, attention waits, ready to discover what the difference may mean. Long before curiosity becomes a spoken question, it can appear as movement. A young child reaches toward a wooden spoon, turns it over, taps it against a table, drops it, and waits for the sound. The spoon may be ordinary to an adult, but to a mind still learning the patterns of the world, it contains many unanswered possibilities. How heavy is it? What does it feel like? Will it make the same sound again? What happens when it falls from a greater height? Can it roll, balance, fit inside another object, or disappear beneath a cloth? These questions may not yet exist as words. They are expressed through looking, touching, repeating, and changing one small part of an action. Early curiosity is often physical. Before children can understand long explanations, they gather information through their senses. They watch movement, follow voices, examine faces, taste safe objects, test surfaces, and notice the effects of their own actions. The world gradually becomes more predictable through countless small encounters. A hand pushes an object, and the object moves. A hidden face returns from behind two hands. Water changes shape when poured into another container. A tower grows less stable as more blocks are added. Each experience adds another quiet piece to the mind's developing picture of reality. Repetition is especially important during this period. An adult may see a child dropping the same object many times and assume that nothing new is being learned. Yet each repetition can confirm that an event is dependable. The object falls again. The sound returns. Someone may pick it up and place it back within reach. The child is not necessarily searching for novelty in every moment. Sometimes curiosity seeks consistency. It asks whether the same action will still produce the same result. A predictable world is easier to explore because it provides a stable background. Once one pattern becomes familiar, attention can shift toward variations. What happens if the object is softer? What if it lands on a rug instead of a hard floor? What if it is released rather than pushed? What if another person performs the action? Small changes allow the developing mind to separate what is essential from what is incidental. This process continues far beyond childhood. Adults also repeat actions when they want to understand a pattern. A cook prepares a familiar dish with a different temperature. A gardener waters one plant more often than another. A musician plays the same phrase slowly, then changes a single note. Repetition becomes a way of asking a more precise question. Children, however, often explore without a clear division between learning and play. A container is interesting because it can be filled, emptied, turned upside down, hidden inside another container, or used to carry something across a room. Play creates a flexible space in which possibilities can be tested without needing an immediate practical purpose. A row of stones may become a road. A blanket may become a shelter. A cardboard tube may become a telescope, a tunnel, or a tool whose purpose changes from one moment to the next. These transformations are partly imaginative, but they are also forms of investigation. The child discovers which objects can support weight, which shapes fit together, how far a voice carries through a hollow tube, and how materials respond when folded or stacked. The imagined purpose invites physical observation. Curiosity, play, and learning become difficult to separate. This does not mean that every action has a hidden lesson, or that childhood exploration follows a careful scientific plan. Much of it is spontaneous, inconsistent, and guided by whatever happens to attract attention. Still, the underlying pattern is familiar. Something is noticed. An action is tried. A result occurs. The result may be repeated, altered, or compared with another experience. Understanding grows through contact with the world. The presence of other people also shapes this exploration. A child often looks toward a familiar adult after encountering something unusual. The adult's expression, voice, or response may help indicate whether the unfamiliar object is safe to approach. This social information does not replace curiosity. It helps regulate it. A strange sound may be explored calmly when a trusted person remains relaxed. A new room may feel easier to investigate when a familiar figure is nearby. The child moves outward, then returns, using the relationship as a stable point from which the unknown can be approached. Curiosity often needs this combination of safety and freedom. When an environment feels too unpredictable, attention may be occupied with caution. When everything is controlled too tightly, there may be little room to test possibilities. Exploration tends to flourish when the world feels secure enough to examine and open enough to contain surprises. Adults experience a similar balance. A new subject is easier to explore when mistakes feel acceptable. An unfamiliar place is more inviting when there are recognizable paths, clear boundaries, or trusted companions. Confidence does not remove uncertainty. It makes uncertainty easier to approach. Questions also become more visible as language develops. At first, they may be brief and practical. What is that? Where did it go? Why is it dark? Over time, they can reach beyond what is immediately present. What happened before I was born? Where does the wind begin? Can an animal remember a dream? Why do people speak different languages? The growing mind learns that words can carry curiosity into places the body cannot directly visit. A question can travel into the past, beneath the ground, inside another organism, or far beyond the visible sky. Adults may not always have complete answers. Sometimes the most honest response is uncertainty. Perhaps no one knows yet. Perhaps the question has several possible answers. Perhaps more observation is needed. Such responses do not have to end curiosity. They can show that knowledge has edges, and that even older, more experienced minds live beside unanswered questions. A child who is always given a quick and certain explanation may receive information, but not always the experience of inquiry. A question can also be explored together. What do you notice? What do you think might happen? How could we find out? These invitations preserve the movement of curiosity. They allow the child's own attention to remain part of the discovery. The same approach can be useful at any age. Before receiving an answer, the mind may pause to examine what it already knows. Which possibilities seem reasonable? And what kind of evidence would help? There is no need to turn every ordinary question into a formal investigation. Sometimes a simple answer is enough, but when the moment allows it, curiosity can be given a little space. That space may contain observation, imagination, repetition, and surprise. It may involve nothing more than watching how a shadow moves across a wall, noticing which objects float, or listening to the different sounds made by rain on glass, leaves, and stone. These quiet experiments are part of a much older human pattern. Before there were written explanations, instruments, or organized schools, people learned by watching, touching, comparing, remembering, and showing one another what they had found. The first movements of curiosity are still present in those simple acts. A hand reaches towards something unfamiliar. Attention follows. The world responds in some small way, and from that response, another question begins to form. As evening deepens, curiosity can become quieter. Questions that felt clear during the day may lose their sharp edges. The mind is no longer arranging every thought into a plan or searching actively for an answer. Ideas begin to drift more freely, touching one another for a moment before moving apart. A familiar question may return in this softer state. Why does a distant memory appear now? How can a room feel different after the lights are lowered? Where does a thought go when attention moves away from it? The question may not demand a response. It can remain nearby without being solved. This quieter form of curiosity is different from the focused search that opens a book, examines an object, or tests an explanation. It does not always lead outward into action. Sometimes it stays within awareness, where imagination, memory, and observation begin to blend. A sound outside may suggest a place that cannot be seen. The shape of a shadow may bring back another room from another year. A passing thought may connect with something learned long ago, although the path between them is difficult to follow. The mind continues exploring, but its steps become less deliberate. As sleep approaches, attention usually becomes less stable. Thoughts may still arise, yet holding them in a clear sequence becomes more difficult. One image replaces another. A question begins, then changes before it reaches an answer. This is a natural transition. Wakeful thinking often depends on keeping a goal active. The mind remembers what it is trying to understand, selects relevant information, and returns to the same subject when distracted. Near sleep, that steady guidance can gradually weaken. Curiosity may remain, but it changes shape. Instead of asking why one event happened, the mind may wander through loosely connected possibilities. A remembered garden becomes a forest. A conversation turns into an imagined journey. A scientific idea becomes a picture of light moving slowly through deep water. The boundaries between observation, memory, and imagination become less firm. There is no need to interpret every image or unfinished thought. Much of this mental activity may be temporary, shaped by recent experiences and the gradual reduction of attention to the outside world. The mind is not necessarily trying to deliver a hidden message. It may simply be moving through stored impressions while wakeful control becomes quieter. Curiosity has always depended on attention, and attention is changing. During the day, an unfamiliar sound may lead to careful listening. Near sleep, the same sound may enter a drifting scene without being examined. A question may appear, but instead of gathering evidence, the mind allows it to dissolve into another idea. The unanswered space remains, though it no longer feels like a task. Perhaps this is one reason gentle mysteries can feel comfortable in the evening. They offer the mind a direction without requiring it to arrive anywhere. The distant stars do not need to be named. The old house does not need to reveal every story. The soft sound beyond the window does not need an immediate explanation. The world can remain partly unknown. Throughout waking life, curiosity helps reduce uncertainty. It encourages the gathering of information, the testing of possibilities, and the formation of more accurate understanding. Yet it also teaches another lesson. Not every uncertainty must be removed at once. Some questions can remain open for years. Some may never receive a complete answer. Others slowly change until the original question no longer seems quite right. Knowledge itself is often provisional. An explanation may fit the available evidence while leaving room for revision. A map may be detailed and still contain blank regions. A theory may describe a pattern clearly without answering every question surrounding it. Curiosity can live peacefully with these limits. It does not always need certainty in order to continue. Sometimes it is enough to recognize that there is more to learn. This recognition is present in ordinary observation. A leaf can be understood as part of a plant and still contain structures that have never been examined. A familiar voice can be recognized instantly, while the exact basis of that recognition remains difficult to describe. A memory can feel vivid, while many of its details have quietly changed. The known and the unknown are not separated by a perfect line. They overlap. What seems familiar may contain hidden complexity. What seems mysterious may already be partly understood. Every answer is surrounded by assumptions, memories, and further questions. Curiosity moves through this changing boundary. It begins with a pause before something unexplained. It notices a gap, a novelty, or a detail that does not fit. It draws attention closer. It may create anticipation, encourage exploration, shape a question, or awaken imagination. It can guide a hand toward an object, a reader toward another page, or a mind toward another person's experience. It can make information more meaningful and help new learning connect with memory. It can reveal the surprising depth of routine things. It can turn boredom into observation and familiarity into a reason to look again. Yet none of these movements needs to be dramatic. Much of curiosity is almost invisible. It is a second glance at a stone, the pause after an unfinished sentence, the feeling that one part of a pattern is missing, the quiet return of a question while rain moves across a window. Human knowledge has grown through countless moments like these. Someone noticed that the stars changed with the seasons. Someone compared the shapes of leaves. Someone wondered why one material floated while another sank. Someone asks what lay beyond a mountain, beneath the soil, inside a cell, or behind a remembered feeling. The larger discoveries began with attention resting on something that was not yet understood. But curiosity does not belong only to discovery. It also belongs to contemplation. A person can wonder without traveling, measuring, or collecting. The mind can approach the unknown gently, without trying to possess it. There is room for questions whose only immediate effect is to make the world feel wider. Why does moonlight seem so different from daylight? Even though both begin with the sun. How many unnoticed lives move through a garden after dark? Which details from this day will remain in memory, and which will disappear without leaving a trace? The questions can pass through awareness slowly. Some may already have explanations. Others may open into subjects too large for a single thought. Their purpose in this moment is not to become a lesson or a problem. They simply reveal that the edge of understanding is always close. Even in the most familiar room, there are processes too small to see, histories that are not remembered, and patterns that have never been noticed. Beyond the window are places not visited, lives not known, and events continuing without awareness of them. The world exceeds every individual view of it. Curiosity is the mind's gentle response to this abundance. It turns toward what is missing, not because the known world is insufficient, but because every known thing seems to lead quietly beyond itself. One answer opens into another question. One observation reveals another layer. One memory touches another and then fades. As attention grows softer, these connections no longer need to be followed. A question may remain unfinished. An imagined scene may lose its shape. A thought may reach the edge of awareness and disappear before its final words arrive. Nothing has been lost by leaving it incomplete. The unknown will still be there when attention returns, waiting without urgency at the quiet boundary of what the mind already knows.